Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Photo Book Friday, the show where I talk about photo books and my growing collection. My name is Harrison. Let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about Brian Ulrich's Is This Place Great or What? This book features 3 separate series from the photographer Brian Ulrich. All 3 series were taken over a span of 10 years. The series are titled Retail, Thrift, and Dark Stores. All of these would be titled The Copia Project. This is one of the books that I picked up early on when I started taking photos. I have come back to it again and again as a consistent inspiration. I think this book really encapsulates the consumer culture that we all live in. Starting off with retail, between 2001 and 2006, Brian went from big box stores to malls, capturing the hyper-consumerist culture of the early 2000s. It really highlights the buy now, worry about it later mentality that a lot of people had in the early 2000s. I love his mix of portrait and mundane objects, how they kind of go together, how these big box stores full of supplies and things to buy somehow intertwine with each other. I find Brian's work to have a big sense of humor in it. I love how he mixes these grand schemes of American culture of consuming, but nobody really seems to be happy. There's not many photos of people smiling, even though they're buying anything they've wanted. I feel like Brian Ulrich has a lot of similarities to earlier photographers like Elliot Erwitt. Halfway through the series, he starts to show the back rooms of these big box stores. And somehow they kind of tie together to the next series of Thrift. I like how his work makes you feel like you're almost a fly on the wall to these worlds. It seems like the camera's not even really there half the time. One of my favorite photos is this man contemplating buying a fishing pole from what I assume is a Bass Pro Shop. There's something haunting, like he's searching for joy, whether or not this fishing pole is going to make him feel something. I like how Brian's work draws so much question and inspiration, how you just wonder so much about the places he's taking photos of. The next series is Thrift. Brian shows how new items are bought in retail and then they end up getting used and then donated. That way they end up in the secondhand store, thrift store, charity shop. The work shows the almost chaotic nature of donations, how people are sorting through all of these different items, trying to create value out of used things. The mild melancholy of retail really highlights in the sadness of thrift. It feels like a hopelessness, like the end of the road for not only these items, but maybe for these people. It feels like a chaotic wasteland of loved items and seeming junk. While retail shows these perfectly put together retail spaces, Thrift highlights these chaotic, mix-mash junk piles, how it shows the messiness of consuming. All these things we buy have to end up somewhere, that this constant consuming ends down a pipeline. I particularly like this photo of coat hangers hanging up in a back room. There's just millions and millions of coat hangers just shoved onto a rack. They're falling onto the floor. It shows the chaos of this working environment, how it must have been madness to sort through all of these items. While the people in Thrift have a level of sadness, I don't think that Brian has a judging eye on them. He's really just capturing the situation. The photos in Thrift were taken between 2005 and 2008, all leading up to the 2008 housing collapse. All of these shopping paradises ending up in these junk-filled wastelands. Somehow Brian is able to find beauty in the chaos of all this stuff. He really has an eye for things that stand out amongst piles of junk. The last series, Dark Stores, took place between 2008 and 2011. This was at the heart of the housing collapse and the economic recession of 2008. In this series, Brian shows when retail goes to die, essentially. While at the beginning of retail, you have pristine shopping paradises, dead stores are the wasteland that's left behind. I think a lot of people have talked about dead malls or closed, abandoned stores in the past. A lot of work has been done with it. But I think Brian is able to stand out from the crowd in this work because he has a continuity of what these stores were. Many of his wide shots are of malls that have just recently closed. They become time capsules for what they used to be. You can almost hear the people shopping, laughing, the music playing over the radio. These stores were once full of life, and now they're empty. I love this quote that Brian includes from former President George W. Bush. It says, "The vitality of our economy depends upon the willingness of Americans to spend." And I think that that reflects upon a lot of this era. One of my favorite parts of Dead Stores is this series that he does of one Circuit City turning into several other businesses after it closed. And I feel like a lot of us have seen that echoed through Spirit Halloween and stores that once were something and were repurposed into something else. I think it's his humor really shining through. It's interesting how Brian talks about that he felt like he was almost an anthropologist versus an artist in this series. In his writing, Brian called this a 10-year obsession, and you can see that obsession shining through in the end product. It takes someone's meticulous eye to be able to capture this amount of content. The continuity of these three series, ending in dark stores, shows the life cycle of our consumer culture. I'll leave a link down below where to purchase this book. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you on the next episode of Photo Book Friday. Cheers.